So I recently had one of you guys ask about doing a glue up video, so I figured I would pair this up with both a drilling and a glue up video, just get them both out of the way for you. That way you can see how it is that I drill and glue up and some of the decisions that I make along the way while I do that. First step that I do after I've cut my blanks, marked my concentricity line. When I glue these up, I will put my concentricity line off into the headstock. That way, as you're drilling, if your headstock and your tailstock don't have like perfect alignment, as you drill, it gets more centered as you go toward the headstock, and then you end up with kind of a little bit wider portion here at the end. So you want your concentricity point where your cap and your body line up to be your most accurate, your most centered, and so put that toward your headstock. That's the first thing I do. Then I take my Easy Wood Tools detail bit and I'm going to flatten off this face, give it just a slight dimple there, and then that'll catch my brad point on my drill bit. Slow that down a little bit, going a little too fast. Be sure you watch your speeds when you're drilling. Make sure you know what speeds you should be drilling at. I use this brass bristle brush in order to clean out the flutes in between, especially with this cocobolo. It's a really oily wood, really dense, and it clogs up a lot. So use that brass bristle brush in order to clean out your flutes often. There we go, and we're through. You can see that perfectly centered hole that we have there on the back side. So this was right here, this is our front side. Here's our back side, perfectly centered in there. Okay, so now for our glue up, I just have a piece of cardboard here, just off of a mailer. And we've got our cap here that we're gonna glue up. Now this was the end that was to the headstock. Remember, our concentricity line was to our headstock. This was to the tailstock. So this end is actually going to be just slightly wider than our headstock end, just because as you're going in and out, you know, the drill bit can catch on that hole a little bit, widen it out some. And if you take your tube here, just a little bit more of a gap between the brass tube and the hole itself. If we look at our other end, it is pretty much flush. There's no gap there at all. It fits perfectly. So when we glue in, I'm going to glue in from our concentricity line end because I want this to be as close to that end as I can, and then we will drip in to our wider end and fill that in with a thin CA, and it'll kind of funnel in. Now, as you can see, these tubes are very well roughened up, so I don't have to worry about roughing them up, but I've got some of these sanding discs, 120 grit sanding discs. You can use regular sandpaper. These sanding discs, the stickiness on the back of them to where I could use them on my disc sander, all wore off, dried out, and so I can't use them for that, but I use them for roughing up these tubes. It works really, really well. So all I'm going to do here is just take my thick Titebond glue and just create a bead, goes all the way around, and go back and forth a few times here. Just like that. And then double check your line and kind of twist it as you go in the hole, just like that. Like I said, just go below the surface a little bit. You can kind of take your finger and kind of move some of the glue onto the rim just to make sure that's all nice and sealed off. And if you want to speed up the process, you can hit it with a little activator. And we'll flip it over and we'll do the other side. Now I just bought some of these, like, I think they're 10 or 50 milliliter bottles. They've got a needle nose tip, work really well for this. And then I just take and I drip in right at the entry there, just one drop at a time. Let that soak into the gap, and then put another drop in. All right, once it kind of rolls over the edge and starts going down your brass tube, that's when I'll stop. Kind of look around. You can actually, I don't know if I can get, you can kind of see right along that rim, there's a bead where the glossiness rolls up from the brass tube onto the wood. And that glossy bead indicates that the gap between your barrel and your wood is full. So it's all filled in with glue. That's going to set there just like that. And so then I'll hit it with my activator to seal that in place all the way around. Then let that set overnight. Give it about 24 hours to fully harden. 12 hours, you'll be good. Sometimes you can do it in just a couple hours, especially resins will work in just a couple hours. Woods, you want to give it more time because they're porous, especially an oily wood like this. I let the wood sit for like 30 minutes before I tried to glue it in. Made sure that there was no oil seeping out of it because it can heat up during the drilling process. So that's how I glue it up. Real nice and simple, but this is how I do it. That way I can guarantee that I've got 100% coverage all the way up and down the blank. So gluing up with the thick CA seals up this end completely and gives you a good tight bond at this end. And then backfilling with thin CA from your funnel end makes sure that you've got full contact all the way up and down. So again, when you're drilling, you kind of get this funneling effect. It's really tight at the end towards your headstock, and then it kind of widens out very slightly, but it's enough to where you can drip thin CA from your wider end down into it and get a really, really good bond. And because I've been doing it this way for so long, I haven't had a blank explode on me in a very long time, and it works really, really well. I forgot to mention one thing. Last step I'll do, if you had any CA glue drip down inside, I'll just take a punch that's a little bit smaller than the brass tube, chip that CA glue out while it's soft before it has a chance to really adhere to the brass. Just kind of carve it out of there. You can use like beeswax. Some people will, my dad actually will take a potato out with him and he'll like jam the brass tube and plug that hole up with potato in order to make it so that the CA glue can't go down inside. But when you jam your brass tube down into something before you go and glue it up, then you have to clean off the outside of your brass tube again, because the potato starch is going to prevent your glue from adhering between your wood and your brass. So just chipping that CA glue out that dripped down, and it barely takes any pressure, barely takes any effort to clean that out. Just kind of go around the whole rim. You can feel when it's cleaned out and smooth. There we go. Inside's nice and clean, ready to go.